that is something that I take with me whenever I put this jersey on, is the importance of someone being able to see me in this jersey and say, oh, that's someone like me and I can do that as well. And I want people to look at our team and say, that is representative of America. The queerness, the people of color, the strong woman is like, that is what our country is about. And to be able to see that representation on this team, I think is so important.
Today we have a very special guest joining us. She is a beloved center back for both club and country, Tierna Davidson. Despite being just 26 years old, Tierna is already a veteran of the national team. She's helped the U.S. women's national team to win both a World Cup and a gold medal at the Olympics. She's also been a standout NWSL player for the Chicago Stars and now Gotham. But last year, she added something even more exciting to her resume. Wife, Tierna, thanks for coming on the show and congratulations.
Thank you so much for having me, Sam.
I'm so happy to see you. I just love talking to you and I'm so excited.
I know, me too. You just have such great energy. And I feel like I've seen this podcast so many times and have seen so many of our friends on it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it gets to be me now.
Oh my God, it's time. Well, I'm so honored that you're here. So I just mentioned you are newly a wife. There have been quite a few weddings for the U.S. women's national team players recently. I want to ask you about more than just the wedding. I want to ask you about how it feels to actually be married. I know that you and your wife, AJ, have been together since college. Has marriage changed anything surprising about your relationship?
So I would say that what was really the big changing point for us, I think, was buying a house together in New Jersey. That was also done last year. So I changed jobs by moving to Gotham. We bought a house and we got married. So I feel like those are the three typical hardest things to do in a relationship, aside from probably having a kid. And did it all in 1 year. But I feel like that was really something that was the next big step in our relationship. I think because, as you said, we've been together for almost 8 years. So it just feels formal, the formality to get married. For all intents and purposes, we've been living together. We've been doing everything together.
Yeah.
But to now kind of financially be invested together in something, I think was a big next step. I feel like that was actually really important for us last year. And then the marriage was just kind of like a cherry on top.
Oh, that's so fun. Well, the wedding looked beautiful. I do feel that similarly, Pat and I had been together for a long time. When we got married, I think the biggest change for me is Pat's, when I say my family's coming, it's that's Pat. And I think maybe kind of before I got married, my family meant my parents and my sister. But now when you say family, it's your relation, that's your family now. And it's kind of cool.
Right. It's that's the person that comes first. And yeah, that's exactly right. That's my family. And obviously my parents and my brother and everyone is still my family. But, she's at the top of the list.
Right at the top of the list. I love that. You met while both playing soccer at Stanford. AJ was the goalkeeper. You were obviously playing center back. What do you think kind of also having that on-field relationship taught you about how to communicate with each other?
It taught us to communicate in a kind of logical way, and in a way that wasn't super charged with emotion, because obviously we can't be taking our relationship from off the field to on the field, and similarly from on the field to off the field. So being able to communicate clearly what we need from each other, especially, as you said, because goalkeepers and center backs need to communicate a lot. Just being really cognizant of how we treat each other around other people as well, I think was something important to learn, and how we kind of set an example for just the professionalism that's required if you're going to be in a relationship with somebody in your workspace. And it was something that I think was bit of a learning point and a bit of uncharted territory, but I think both of us are willing to kind of lean into that and get comfortable with being uncomfortable in certain situations. So I think it was a really interesting starting point for a relationship, but I think it was really helpful for us.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, I'm so happy for you that you're married. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I know that you went to Stanford, obviously to play soccer, but also to study engineering. And I don't know if I knew this about you, Tierna, but we read this when we were researching for this. You dreamed of being an astronaut when you were a little kid.
I did, yes. That was really what I thought I was going to do. Even last night at the Houston game, there were two astronauts there, and I got to meet them, and I was totally geeking out.
Oh my God, that's actually really, really cool. Well, so I imagine that like the dream of being an astronaut kind of got overshadowed when you started being really good at soccer. You started getting attention from the US women's national team. Obviously, just even getting into Stanford or playing for the US women's national team would have been a huge achievement, but you started doing them both at the same time, and I imagine there just wasn't that much room left for astronaut endeavors. Although what I will say is you could still become an astronaut after you play soccer. I'm just saying. I also feel like there's something like kind of Hannah Montana-y about studying engineering at Stanford and also playing at the highest level in the world. So that must have been crazy. But there must have come a moment where you had to choose. And I think maybe it was when you decided to drop out of Stanford and go pro. Was there a moment of like clarity around this decision while you were at Stanford where you were just like, soccer is my thing that I'm going to pursue, and I have to kind of take this big step to do that?
I would say there are two specific moments that stand out to me in that journey. And it was really difficult because I have been raised to really value education and to put 100% into my education. And so when it was actually in spring of 2018, we were playing China in Cleveland, and I had to take an organic chemistry final the morning of the game.
I remember this.
So I had to sit for a 4-hour OChem final and then go start and play in a game. And I couldn't tell you like one single action that I did in that game because I was like so tired from having just sat for a final. And I remember thinking, I'm not getting the most out of my education, and I'm not getting the most out of myself on the field. And I would like to be able to be really good at both. I would like to be able to put 100% into both, but maybe it's just not at the same time. A school like Stanford offers such an amazing level of education, but also such an amazing experience for the students. You get to meet amazing students. You get to meet amazing professors. It's like such a great environment to be in, to learn and to cultivate yourself. And I felt like I wasn't getting the most out of that. I felt like I was trying to pass my classes and trying to just get to the next class, get to the next step, as opposed to really enjoying what it had to offer. And
you were like kind of in survival mode.
Yeah. And so I felt like that's not what I want to get out of my 4 years. I don't want to rush through my 4 years to get a degree and then go play soccer. But it was really difficult because I think, at that time, there weren't many people skipping college or dropping out of college to go play professionally. I mean, you had Mal and Lindsay, and those were two great success stories, but I was like, I don't know if I'm that. Fall of 2018, I was kind of considering what I wanted to do. I'd gotten injured, so I was actually able to take a lot of classes and really focus on my academics then. But then towards the end of the quarter, I had been speaking with my major advisor about what I wanted to do. She actually told me, you can get your education at any time. You can't play soccer for your whole life. And she literally said, what are you still doing here? And that was just a big moment of clarity because I feel like she was one of the first people that didn't really have a vested interest on each side, on either side.
Right.
I mean, obviously she maybe wants me to get my degree, but it wasn't like someone who knew me super intimately and therefore had a lot of other biases. Right. And that was one of the best pieces of advice that I think I got throughout my decision-making process. And I still value it. And that's still kind of like the guiding light for me, which is, I can go back and get my education, and Stanford is going to be there and help me do that, whether I'm 29, whether I'm 38, whether I'm 40. Like, there is a ticking clock on your body and your ability to play at the highest level.
Yeah. I mean, now thinking about this in detail, and even hearing you had used the word logical earlier when you were describing your relationship with AJ, and it does kind of seem like a logical decision, where I imagine it was so difficult at the time because you're weighing all the emotions you have with like your Stanford teammates and this idea that you have of graduating college. Do you plan now, when you are done playing soccer at this level to go back to Stanford and get that engineering degree?
Yes, I mean, shout out to my mom, but I think I literally would not sort of like live another day if I didn't end up getting a degree at some point. Yeah, she's like, you constantly ask me, when are you going to finish school? But it's certainly something that I'd like to do when I'm done playing.
You mentioned this a little bit earlier, but you were kind of caught between two generations of players. Like my generation, we all pretty much went to college, except for Lindsay and Mal, who actually are both a little bit younger than me. But now it feels like it's the norm to skip college and even leave high school or do high school while you're playing professional soccer in the NWSL. Do you still see value in players going to play collegiately, or do you think the way the game is going, the value lies in kind of what you said, like play while you can now and know that your education will be there for you when you're done?
I mean, I think that something that is really important to consider is the development of the person outside of sport. I think that's something that you get from being around your peers in a different environment that's not soccer, and being exposed to a lot of different things. I feel that there's such an amazing kind of mystery of the world when you go into college. Like, the world is at your fingertips. You could study anything. You could meet anybody. And I do think there's certainly value in that, because I think we can both probably speak to people that we thought were going to play soccer till their legs fell off, and then maybe decided that they liked something better in college, or they were more passionate about something else, or they, met somebody and they just totally changed the trajectory of their life. And it's not for the better, it's not for the worse necessarily, but it's just something different. So I do think there's value in continuing to develop other dimensions in your life, and then be able to come to the conclusion like, yes, soccer is what I want to do. I also think it's different now than maybe when you started playing after college, because there's much more of a financial incentive. I don't think anybody wanted to skip college to play for like $10,000 because a college degree is really valuable.
Right. And it made more sense to, if you were on a full ride, to stay, and you were like, well, this is worth a certain amount of money, and it makes more sense to stay and do this, especially considering the time I entered the league in 2015, my resources at UCLA were better than the resources in the NWSL, the athletic training, the facilities, the fields, all that stuff was actually kind of a step down from college.
Right. And there have been waves of how stable the league has been.
Yeah,
so,
true.
It's, a 4-year college degree is something that at some point was much more valuable than entering into a professional league that maybe didn't pay players that well and also could not be there the next year. And I think that is changing now. It's like the league is flourishing, and players are getting offered large contracts and better facilities and better treatment. And it's becoming a much more professional environment. And so I think, now players are seeing that you can properly make a full career out of being a women's soccer player. And it's not, you have to also be on the national team to be able to make some sort of long lasting career out of it. And I think that's where the change is happening, is that now it's not just making the national team. It's also like you can have a super successful career as an NWSL player or as a player overseas. And so I think there are just, the decision points are shifting a little bit.
That makes a lot of sense. Well, you mentioned this was like the fall of 2018 that you kind of had these moments of, or this moment with your advisor of clarity that it was time to move on. So you entered the draft in 2019. You got drafted by the Chicago Red Stars, now the Chicago Stars. And you spent 5 years there, almost your whole professional career until last year. What about Chicago, the team and the city, made it a good place for you to start your professional career and made it feel like home?
The players that Chicago had when I was there were just absolutely amazing people to learn from, both on and off the field. And I valued that so much as a young player. I felt like my growth was accelerated so much being around those types of people. But I don't feel like I can speak highly enough of the city. I feel like Chicago is such an amazing place to live. And I think that's obviously one of the big selling points to being on that team, is living in a city that is great size, has amazing food, has great people, is priced pretty well, given that it's a major city. I think that was also something that was always a draw, is no matter what was going on with the team or the club or whatever, you also were living in a place that was fun to live in and fun to be a young adult in. Yeah, like it wasn't a perfect experience, and I don't think anybody's professional experience is perfect. But I think it allowed me to grow a lot as a player, as a leader, as a person. And I really, really value the people that I met while I was there.
Chicago is an incredible place, and I'm so glad that it was a good place for you to learn and grow as you entered into the league. Last offseason, you made the move to Gotham, and at the time you said that you wanted to go to the New York, New Jersey area, kind of get outside your comfort zone a little bit. You've played one season there. You guys made the semifinals in the playoffs. You had a great season. You're getting ready to start another. There have been a lot of changes this offseason, but I'm curious, in what ways has this move pushed you outside of your comfort zone?
The nature of kind of going a little bit into the unknown is something that allows for growth. But I also think too, stepping into a team and having more of a leadership role is something that I think needed in my toolbox to grow. And I think that's something that Gotham has really given me and forced me to kind of step up to the plate with. That's something that I think is really important. I think once we get to this age and this level, you're thinking about adding 1% in your game, in your person. And that was something that I felt like was needed for me, was a bit more of how do I become someone that is not just learning now and not just taking in, but is now giving out as well. And I think perhaps if I stayed at Chicago, like that role would naturally also occur, because that just happens as you get older and younger players come in and they see you as a leading figure. But I think, interestingly, stepping into a new team and having to do a role like that was difficult in a different way, because you have to earn people's trust and respect again, and you have to relearn a new landscape and assess kind of how you fit in and how you can help and how you can be influential. And I think that's something that I've been learning over the past season and now into this next season.
Transitioning from a player who is always learning and receiving to being someone who's giving out and being a leader and kind of sharing your experiences with newer players. And Gotham signed some really exciting players this offseason. There is NWSL rookies like goalkeeper Ryan Campbell, midfielder Sophia Cook, defender Lily Real. There's also new Brazilian forward Gabby Portillo. Midge Purse is going to be back. Who are you excited to play with, and where do you see yourself kind of giving back to the team?
You know, we have a really great group of players coming in, whether it's rookies or just players that are new to the environment. And I think that it's where we're going to need a bit of like just learning as a team is how do we come together very quickly, and how do we become successful very quickly. And I think that, you know, it's always ideal to have a very great start to the season. And I think that that's something that we've been working really hard on in preseason. I feel like the NWSL is all about waves of momentum, and to be able to start the season strong is something that I think we all really value. And the older players know how important it is to have a good first foot forward, because if you get into a rut, it's like sometimes hard to get out of. But I think, you know, educating the rookies coming in about, you know, what's the standard on the field, how to operate as a professional, teaching them what are the tactics, what's the system that we play, how do we need you to show up on the field. But then also too is how to make new players feel welcome and feel confident enough to put their best product on the field. I think that's something that we've all felt as a new player to a team, is you only start playing your best when you feel the confidence and trust from your teammates. And so how do we get that to a high level and get everybody firing on all cylinders and operating at close to 100%. And that's something that's really been fun to see. We spent almost 3 weeks in Spain together as a team. And so you kind of have that forced connection off the field, because it's like you're not you're not doing anything else but hanging out
Yeah.
together. And so to be able to develop those relationships off the field as well, and just spend time doing silly things, whether it's exploring the city or making a puzzle, whatever it is,
Yeah.
I think has been really nice.
That's awesome. This is my last question on Gotham, and then I want to talk national team a little bit. How are you all handling, and just you as an individual, Tierna? I feel like Gotham, there was a lot of headlines about Gotham this offseason about losing a lot of players. You made a lot of changes. The team made a lot of changes last season. There was talk about building a super team. The front office has been aware that the fans are maybe a little bit stressed about losing players. And I imagine that you all have to just kind of drown out the noise. How do you handle expectations from the outside, knowing that what really matters is what you're doing in the locker room with these players, bringing your team together? How do you maybe separate that or keep that outside of your team bubble?
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately, we're the only ones that are seeing our product on the field right now and seeing kind of what we're developing on the field. And so we're the only ones that get to see 100% of the picture. That is maybe fans see 50% or 60%. And, I think that it's fair to say that we've had a lot of departures, and like it's fair to say what's the team going to look like. And I mean, even for ourselves, we're thinking, like, what are we going to look like? Who's going to be big contributors? Who's going to help us to that next level? But that's something that you kind of have to take every year with professional teams. Is rosters roll over, people make decisions for themselves and their lives, and you just kind of have to rebuild at the end of each season, beginning of each successive season. And I think that's what we're doing, and continuing to remind everybody that what's important is what we're building on the field. And if we can take that and put it into a game, that's ultimately what our job is. Like, our job is to put a good product onto the field, and hopefully fans will like it and buy into it. But ultimately it's just about us and the players that are there in front of us right now.
I want to talk a little bit about your growth on this team. I know that in 2019, which is that year that you first started playing professionally, you made the World Cup roster. And even though you were the youngest player on the roster, you got to play. You assisted Julie Ertz to score against Chile in your first ever World Cup game. Do you remember what was going through your head as the youngest player on the team, playing in that game, getting an assist, being in France? Like, what are your memories from that game?
I remember the day before the game at pregame training, I think it was Tony said, "Oh, you'll take the corners." And I was like, "I'll take the corners?" I hadn't taken a corner, I think, on the team ever. And then he was like, "Oh yeah, like you'll take them." And I was like, "Okay, sure." So I think that was definitely, and that's how I ended up getting an assist. But I think that was definitely something that was like a little bit unexpected, but a little bit exciting to be involved in something that I hadn't been involved in previously. The excitement around those World Cup games, the palpable energy when you walk into the stadium, and especially because that game was at Parc des Princes, I feel like that's such a cool stadium in Paris and has such a great energy to it. I had to continue to remind myself that it's 90 minutes of a game that I've played for, God, I don't know how many years. And, whether it's in front of thousands of people, whether it's in front of just our parents back when we were growing up in club, it's 90 minutes of a game that I know very well and I love. And ultimately, when I get on the field, it's 22 people on the field, and it's kind of the same thing.
It's the same game, I guess.
Yeah, like I that's what I try to remind myself of when you're playing in big games, and I might feel nervous or anxious. I'm thinking to myself, you're not going to see something that you've like never experienced before, whether it's in a training or in a game. Obviously, you're playing against new players. Maybe there's like little things that are different, but ultimately, it's like the pictures that you're seeing are things that you've done before. It's just now about executing it under pressure, and the ability to kind of remove that pressure, I think, is what makes players succeed at the high levels. Like, how can you remove it or embrace it as a young player, being able to see some of the older players just absolutely eat it up was so reassuring to me, because I'm like, oh, if they're having fun and if they're absolutely thriving on this, then surely I can complete a pass. Surely I can do a defensive action. So
I know. I actually feel like that when you say that, that game that we beat Thailand 13-0, that we got so much, kind of attention in the media for whatever, beating them by too many goals, celebrating too hard. I still look back at that and I'm like, when I saw Pino celebrating her goal with such joy, I think it did for me what you're saying. Like, Pino was under so much pressure at that World Cup. And to just play with a freedom and with a joy, and to be like, of course I am this happy I just scored a goal in a World Cup. Look at our team. Look at who we have. It was so special. And I agree that the older players set us up for success by enjoying the pressure and then making us feel like we could enjoy it too and not have to be perfect and not have to be tense all the time. I really think it was the veteran players at that tournament that enabled us to all perform.
That's kind of part of the role as a veteran, and that's something that's really difficult, is shouldering some of that pressure to take it off of younger players so that they can perform. Because once you've been in a major tournament, then part of your responsibility, aside from just performing, is guiding others through the maze that is a major tournament and how crazy it can get, and being able to take a bit of that chaos and pressure off of the players that are new to the environment.
Last summer, when you won a gold medal with the team in Paris, that was 5 years after we were a part of the World Cup team together. What I've heard about the Olympics is that it had more of that feeling, of that kind of feeling that we had in 2019, where maybe the tournament was a little bit less stressful, maybe it was more fun. And I'm wondering how the Olympics felt. Do you think that you were able to get that feeling maybe because of Emma, maybe because some of the veteran players were shouldering the burden a little bit? What was your impression of the Olympics, and how, as a more veteran player now, did you experience a different tournament, but one that resulted in the team winning?
Emma did a very good job of setting the precedent of, this is a tournament and nothing is going to be perfect. We've only been together as a group for a month, so we can't expect absolute fluidity and perfection from ourselves, but it's really about just the next action, whether it's on the field 1 minute to the next minute or one game to the next game. It's really just about how can we learn from that to the next. And she was really adamant about her taking pressure from media and press and outside sources and shouldering that and that being her responsibility so that we could continue our little isolated bubble. I feel like it's spoken about a lot in major tournaments, is keeping our bubble intact. And I think that was something that was super helpful, especially because there were so many questions around her being a new coach and our roster being younger and there being different players, and we hadn't been successful at a previous Olympics, and the 2023 World Cup was not as successful as we had hoped. And so I think that having someone as a leader that understood those responsibilities so that the players could focus as much as we needed to on performing and being players was really important. And I think too, there was a little bit of, we are just going to do the best that we can. And, there was the pressure of performing because we hadn't performed at the World Cup, but there also was maybe this, maybe the US is not number one anymore. Like maybe other teams are up ahead of them, and maybe they're not the end all be all anymore. So maybe there's a little bit more of that underdog mentality that we were like, no, we're going to fight and scrap and be gritty. And I think that gives a bit of extra motivation and a little bit of extra freedom to be the underdog in some ways. I certainly think that, we're always, no matter our standing, respected as one of the greats. But I think that having a little knock to the confidence and a little knock to the world standings was helpful to free us a little bit of expectation and say, what's the worst that can happen?
Taking that with us, now we're here at She Believes. There's all these young players on the roster. Emma is really committed to kind of building this into a bigger pool. There's a lot of young talent in here. And knowing that you've been in their position, trying to earn your spot, being a really young player. And from where you are now, what are you seeing these young people bringing in? Like, what kind of energy have they brought to camp?
It's incredible energy. I feel like it's always so fun to have new players in that bring different energy, different talents, and to be able to see them succeed and to learn and to see their growth even just over a short period of time is so amazing. And I don't know, like it's really exciting because it's really easy to buy into Emma's strategy of like deepening the pool. You're like, well, yeah, if they can start performing over the next 2 years, then to be able to select from 50 players rather than 30 players is incredible. And that also builds in, securities if unfortunately, like if somebody goes down with an injury and you need to replace someone last minute and, anything can happen around tournament time before you name a roster or even during a tournament. And so to be able to have everyone have experience on a field with the team, have experience with the tactics and with the language that this coaching staff uses, I think is so important because, you want anybody that steps onto the field for the national team to feel prepared and to feel like they can focus on what they need to do because they have learned everything that they need to learn in order to be successful with the team. Obviously, like it always drives the standard because, people are always chomping at your heels. Like everybody's always competitive and always vying for roster spots, for starting spots. Right. So it keeps the environment really fresh, I think.
Yeah, it definitely seems refreshing to be part of. It feels like a new era in a way. I know it was a new era when Emma started, but it's just the beginning of the cycle now, and it feels like she's implementing all of these things. So I'm really, really excited for y'all, and it's been so fun to watch. I do want to ask you about something a little bit in a different topic. It's been on my mind. I know it's been on a lot of our listeners' minds, and so I can only imagine, Tierna, that it is also on yours. I know that you are a queer woman. You've just gotten married. So I think I want to know a little bit about how it feels for you to represent the United States right now. I imagine it must be complicated to represent a country that seems to be treating queer and trans people, especially young people and athletes, with ignorance and cruelty. And at the same time, I know that it's really important to have representation in these areas. Visibility is important, and talking about these things is really important. So if you don't mind sharing, how are you grappling with this, and what does it mean to you right now to be representing your country and also dealing with what's going on off the field?
Everybody on this team feels that in some way, whether it's because you're a woman, whether it's because you're a person of color, whether it's because you're queer, or all of the above. It's something that's really difficult because, it's always such an honor to play for this team and to represent this country. But as you said, it's kind of hard to grapple with what country am I representing right now? Or it's like, am I proud of what our country is doing and who we are? And so I think it's sometimes separating the pride that you have as a player to put on this crest because of what this team means and the history of this team and the players that have come before and worn this crest. And I think in times like this, I think about that more. I think about the pride that I have in representing this team and how this team has been able to represent our community and been able to push for rights for many different minority groups. And I think that is something that I take with me whenever I put this jersey on, is the importance of someone being able to see me in this jersey and say, oh, that's someone like me and I can do that as well. I think in terms of representing this country on an international stage, I want people to look at our team and say, that is representative of America. Like the queerness, the people of color, the strong women, is like, that is what our country is about. And that's so important to see, that whatever is happening with our country and our government, it's there's so much more than that to this country. Like the people in this country are so much more complex and diverse than what's happening. And to be able to see that representation on this team, I think is so important. I think on an individual level, the experience that I have seeing what is happening is scary, because I frequently think about rights that could be taken away from me as a woman and as a queer person. And, I understand my position of privilege that I have right now. I am a relatively wealthy white queer person so that affords me a lot of privileges. And we got married, so we have like that kind of in our back pocket, but you never know at this point what could be taken away or what could be tried to be taken away. And so it is something that, we think about frequently as a family. And it is always a little bit in the back of our mind. But I think that, while I don't think I'll ever be as, I don't even know the right word to describe Pino. Like, I'll never be on that level of advocacy. I feel like she is just like in a different world. I definitely strive to continue to represent the queer community on this team, because being a young player coming into this environment and feeling so comfortable and welcomed with the players that we had on this team is something that helped me grow as a person and feel comfortable with who I am. And so to continue to do that for other players and then, fans and people that watch our game is something that I take as a responsibility and a great honor.
It's so fascinating to me the way we've been talking so much about this transition from being a younger player to a veteran, and to have you bring up Pino right at the end when we're on this really difficult topic is so clear to me, Tierna, that you are the torchbearer right now. You're in this era of your career where you are passing on all that we learned from somebody like Megan Rapinoe, and now you're in this position to carry that and teach those ways to this younger generation. And so I feel like this team is in such great hands with leadership like you on the team. We here at the Women's Game support the queer community, and we will continue to advocate for you. And I just want to thank you so much for being so open about this and sharing how you feel with us. I am thinking of you, and I feel, again, like this team and this country should be so proud to have you representing them. So thank you so much for being here with us, and I'm excited to watch you with Gotham in the NWSL this year.
Thanks, Sam. Thanks for giving me the platform.
Oh my gosh, I just absolutely love chatting. I wish we had more time. Thank you all so much for listening. Tierna is seriously one of a kind. She's so smart. She's so wonderful to talk to. I need to ask her for her opinions and her advice more often. And I just love seeing her step up for both Gotham and the U.S. Women's National Team this year in such a big way. Both teams are better off for having Tierna on their sides. We'll be watching games all weekend this weekend, starting with the Challenge Cup on Friday night at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on Prime Video. And then, don't forget, the FA Cup quarterfinals are on Saturday and Sunday. All right, everybody, you know the drill. Please follow along with us on social media, subscribe to our feed wherever you get your podcasts, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. It really helps us out, and we just want to make sure that you never miss an episode. Thank you all so much for being here, and we'll see you soon.